Hello lovely people. Today I wanted to talk about some of the most intimidating books on my TBR.
Sophie Vlogs.
This video can essentially be split into three parts, and that's chunky boys, difficult form, and lots of emotions. Shall we start off with the chunky boys? Starting with this little beast of a book. This is The Last Pre-Raphaelite, Edward Burne-Jones and the Victorian Imagination by Fiona McCarthy. I intended to read this for non-fiction November. It's obviously the one I left till the end, despite the fact that it's the chunkiest, and I probably should have read it first. But I did that because psychologically, I'm intimidated by this book. And I know that it's not actually that bad, because the text is quite large, but for some reason the sheer chunky boy size of this I have like a mental block. I have intended to read this for so long, and I was so thrilled when I found it in a second-hand shop because it's like £20 full price, and I was like, that's a lot of money, but I love the Pre-Raphaelites, and I don't know a lot about Edward Burne-Jones. All of that information is telling my brain that this is going to be very interesting, but every time I pick it up and I feel the weight of it, my brain just goes, I'll just try something else. I have read Fiona McCarthy before, and I've really enjoyed it, and I think she's a very good biographer, so at some point I am going to read this. I'm determined. It's just, I also cannot deny any longer that it puts me off. In a similar vein, this is Ida, A Sword Among Lions by Paula J. Giddings. This is a biography of Ida B. Wells, who is a feminist campaigner that I want to know more about because I think she sounds absolutely fascinating. First of all, this is another quite chunky one. This is something like 800, this is 800 exactly, 800 pages long, which is not the longest book I'll ever have read. I read The Wise Man's Fear recently, and that was like 1,000 pages, but crucially that one's fiction. And I definitely find fiction easier to read than non-fiction. My partner's the other way round. He reads non-fiction like there's no tomorrow, but give him a fiction book and it'll take him forever. Whereas for me, an 800-page fiction book is fine, but an 800-page non-fiction book is very intimidating. Another aspect of this is that I now know that Ida B. Wells actually wrote an autobiography, so part of me isn't sure whether I should read her life in her own words rather than her life in someone else's words. I don't know. The other part of me is like, just read both, Sophie. But I cannot deny that this one also super duper intimidates me, despite the fact that I am actively interested in this person's life. Once again, the third one is less chunky. This is the least chunky of all the boys. But this is Perdita, The Life of Mary Robinson by Paula Byrne. This was a pick it up on a whim kind of thing in a second-hand bookshop, I'm not going to lie to you. Mary Perdita Robinson was in her time the darling of the London stage, mistress to the most powerful men in England, a renowned feminist thinker and best-selling author more famous for her poetry than Wordsworth. Again, she sounds like a fabulous, interesting woman. This one is actually the size of the text that intimidates me. So it's not an unreasonably chunky book, but for some reason, because the text is quite small, something about me, every time I pick it up, I keep picking it up and intending to read it, and I get like a page in, and then I'm like, maybe I'll read something else instead. So those three, for very similar reasons, I keep being like, I'm gonna do them, and then I don't. The next three books are very much based around their form, is why I am yet to read them. The first of these is Wayward Girls and Wicked Women, an anthology of stories edited by Angela Carter. Short stories are a medium that I want to like more than I do. I quite frequently read short story collections, and there are some standouts, but on the whole they're just fine, and then I give them 3 out of 5 stars, and then I walk away and I maybe think about 2 of the stories again, but generally not hugely. But I keep buying short story collections because they have really interesting concepts behind them. This is again a second-hand book buy. That's most of my books, let's be honest. But this one I really want to like because there are some really lovely inscriptions on it. So someone said, here's hoping that you do all of these evil and naughty deeds in your life, love Joe. and someone else got given this for their 21st birthday in 1989 with the inscription, "To the wildest, wickedest women I know in Hackney, love Robin." And I love books that have inscriptions in them, so I really want to keep this for those lovely inscriptions. But I'm quite strict about keeping books on my shelves. Only books that I've read go on my shelves, and they only go on there if I've read them and I've really loved them, or if I've had a complicated reading experience, maybe I want to reread them. So the books that I keep are books that are like, I want to return to, and not a lot of short story collections make that. So I think partly I fear that this book that I really like the concept of, I might not like the execution of. I think there are some interesting contributors to here. Some of them I know, like Juna Barnes, Catherine Mansfield. These are names that I'm familiar with, but I've never read before, and most of them are names that I don't know. And then equally, I've had a bit of a mixed reading experience with Angela Carter herself. Like, I really liked her Bloody Chamber retellings of fairy tales. I thought that that was really fabulous, and that was the first Angela Carter that I read. I've also read The Passion of New Eve and The Magic Toy Shop, and both of those just didn't really 100% work for me. I found myself liking parts of them, but on the whole I found myself just feeling like it didn't really fit with me. I think she does some wonderful, like, descriptions and stuff like that, but there was, like, a meat and a soul, like a connection there that just wasn't there for me. So I think equally, because she's the editor of this, like, part of me is also worried that this hesitancy that I have about Angela Carter will also play in. I don't know. I will read it at some point. I will, I promise. But, like, you know, like, I'm intimidated, and I'm also nervous. The next one is Oroonoko and Other Writings by Aphra Behn. Aphra Behn is one of those people who I'm like, you seem like a pretty cool person. She is like a spy and a playwright, like in the 1600s, which is pretty cool for a woman. I've only ever read The Rover by her, and I studied it for a module at university. So I've kept this because I keep meaning to try some of her other work. But I think I didn't necessarily love The Rover the first time I read it, but I did really enjoy studying it. And I think I have a concern that I won't like her writing, even though I think that I should. I don't know. I don't read a huge amount of plays. Something about this intimidates me. Oroonoko is the story of a noble slave who loved the princess, and I don't know if that sounds a bit oof, you know? I just don't know. That's one where I'm like, I don't know. But it intimidates me, so I keep not reading it. The final one on a form note is the Orkneyinga Saga, which is a history of the Earls of Orkney. This is like an old saga. The Orkney Isles are like off the coast of Scotland. Objectively, I think I would enjoy knowing the information in this. I think sometimes I struggle with sagas because of like the form that they are in. They're not necessarily, I don't know, I think a lot depends upon translation and whether it is like a good engaging translation or not, and I think sometimes bad translations can ruin perfectly good texts. But yeah, this is another one that has been in my little TBR pile for such a long time and that I keep meaning to pick up to read another saga, and then I keep not doing so. The final two are books that I've been meaning to reread for a very long time, and that I keep putting them off because I think these two are both, I'm scared of how I will feel upon a reread. So the first one is A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. I meant to reread this for the Asian Readers On, and then I didn't because I read quite a few heavy books for that, and I was like, I cannot deal. Because I don't remember a lot about this. I remember it is about the friendship between these two women as they live under the Taliban regime. I just remember this like wrecking me emotionally, but I read it like when I was like 15, which is over 10 years ago now, and I don't know if I'm ready to be emotionally ruined again, or to read this and to not like it, you know? I just remember there's something to do with the film Pinocchio that plays in this, and that I like wept like a tiny baby. And it's like, do I want to read this and, as a more mature reader, realise that, like, it's not as good as I remember it? Do I want to read this and still love it, but then be, like, emotionally ruined? So I keep not rereading it, despite the fact that I am doing this let's refresh the shelves and assess everything on it. In a similar vein, the final book is Sexing the Cherry by Jeanette Winterson, and I've been having this journey with Jeanette Winterson where I don't know if she's for me anymore. Orange is Not the Only Fruit will always be a book that I love. I love that deeply. The latest Jeanette Wintersons that I have been reading have just not emotionally got me. 10 years ago, when I was like 17, Jeanette Winterson was one of my favourite authors ever, specifically because I read Orange Is Not the Only Fruit, I read Sexing the Cherry, and I read The Passion. About 4 years ago, I meant to reread Sexing the Cherry and The Passion, and I just haven't, because I keep having this reading experience with her where I read her books and I see that it is objectively written in a way that maybe 17-year-old Sophie would have absolutely loved, but that 27-year-old Sophie just isn't connecting to emotionally. So I read them and I feel not the emotions. And then that makes me sad, and then that makes me question whether Jeanette Winterson is for me anymore. And then the deciding factor is it just that I read her best books first, and that's why I loved her so much, because I read her best books first, or is it that I read her books at the right time, but now is not the right time? Sometimes I find it very hard to give up on authors that I used to love, and I think that this is one of those cases where I don't know whether to just give up on Jeanette Winterson and accept that maybe where she's at as a writer is no longer the type of thing I like. You know, writers evolve just as readers evolve. So I have all of these questions about, like, is it that I no longer like her work? Is it that her more recent work is not for me, but her older work is? I just don't know. But this is such a little book, and I've been meaning to also reread The Passion at some point. They're so small. And yet I just keep putting it off, because in my head I'm like, if I never reread them, then I never have to be disillusioned. I don't know. I'm not normally like such like a in my head reader. I'll just read the things, and if I like them, I like them. If I don't, I don't. I don't need to have like a personality crisis about it. But occasionally at the edges I'm like, but do I? That's it. I had to record this really quickly because my camera is so dying, so I'm sorry if this was a bit, like, chunking through. I would love to know, what are the books on your TBR that intimidate you the most? I think it used to be more big books intimidated me, but I've read a number of those big books over the last year or two, and I've actually really enjoyed the experience of it. So I think I've, like, chipped away at that a little bit when it comes to fiction, but definitely not when it comes to non-fiction. That fear is still within me. I would just love to hear, like, what are your attitudes? What are the things that make you intimidated by books? Do you even get intimidated by books? Do you just, like, brush it off, like water off a duck's back, as Jinx would say? All this and more, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you have a really lovely day, and I will see you next time for something different.